Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much to everyone. Some people have been here with us since this morning, so thank you so much to y'all, the real MVPs. Some people who are just joining us, thank you so much and welcome to the Spatial Imagination. My name is Amara Spence. I'm the creative director at MAIA. I would love to introduce you to my fellow MAIA Babs. So there's Amber, there's Grace, there's Selena, who's a tech wizard, so she's hiding. Oh, there she is. There's Bez, who's run out somewhere. There he is, looking glamorous. And there's a few other members of the team who will be joining the Spatial Imagination throughout. We'd really like to welcome you to this space, and just a few housekeeping things before we get into the good stuff. So this session is being recorded. We invite you to turn off your camera or drop us a message if you prefer not to be in the recording. We will be adding subtitles to the recordings for when we publish as a note. Please take the time to get used to the Zoom features. And I'm very conscious that I might be repeating this for lots of people who have been with us since 10 o'clock this morning. So thank you for bearing with us. Get familiar with the Zoom function, send some emojis if you feel like it. Pin a speaker by hovering over their name if you want to pin someone in particular. And if you have any specific needs, please get in touch with any of the MAIA team and we will do our best to support you. Do keep your mic on mute unless one of the facilitators or speakers or artists requests otherwise, just so we can try and minimize background noise. That being said, please don't apologize for any children, pets, doorbells, deliveries, anything. It's all welcome here. We ask that you do remember to respect who's speaking at the time. Please don't speak over them. Acknowledge the space that you're taking up. That's something for everyone to be really intentional about. And we do take a very firm stance on any form of harassment or abuse. So any of it will be removed immediately from the conversation. But this also means that we're asking people to be very intentional about the language that they use. Please consider how it impacts others, and please think about it before you say anything. Please keep in touch with us, engage in the conversation on social media, use the hashtag TSI2021. If we are kicked out of the Zoom chat for any reason, check your emails, we'll send follow-up instructions. And I would love to introduce you to our incredible artists. If you were with us this morning, you'll know that in A Liberated Future, I Imagine, we invited 6 artists and practitioners to share responses to the title Provocation. And I'm very, very honored. I'm very, very humbled. I'm very excited to introduce MAIA, Josephine Budge and Munotida Chinyanga. So if I just share, MAIA Josephine Budge is a speculative writer, artist, curator, and pleasure activist whose practice navigates intimate explorations of race, art, ecology, and feminism, working to activate movements that catalyze human rights, environmental evolutions, and troublesomely queered identities. I love that. I want it on a t-shirt. MAIA is the recipient of the 2020 Local, International and Planetary Fictions Fellowship with Curatorial Frame Helsinki and EVA International Limerick, and will be researching the topic pleasurable ecologies, my favourite things, formations of care, curation as future building. MAIA is also a member of Queer Ecologies 2020, initiator of the Apocalypse Reading Room Project, a recipient of the 2020 Bernie Grant Micro Commission funding, and lead artist on My Collective, project with Chisenhale Studios and Feral Practice. Lovely to have you, MAIA. What an extraordinary person you are. And Munotida Chinyanga, an anti-disciplinary practitioner creating work through direction, sound design. Her practice focuses on performance, how performance and sonic art can facilitate the bringing together of communities, especially in environments that don't have a constant connection to the arts, mediating language that is cross-cultural, creating both sonic and performative experiences for audiences. Munotida has worked at venues and institutions such as the Young Vic, the Gate Theatre, Royal Exchange Manchester, with Creative Europe residencies in Serbia, France and Malta. Munotida directed productions and masterclasses at the National Theatre of Rome and the National Institute of Ancient Drama. She produced work for the Yuan Tang Museum in China, supported by UKNA. It's an honour to have you, Munotida. It's an honour to have you both in conversation, and I would love to hand over to you both. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us. Wow.
Thank you, Mara. Do you know you're gonna read my full bio? It's got like slowly like redder throughout it as it went on. And we are going to share some artist provocations to begin with, and then we'll have a chat. But we also would really love to engage with everyone who's here. So please do feel free to use the chat to ask questions. The wonderful MAIA team will kind of be keeping an eye out for questions, and we'll come back to them later on. Yeah, and Munotida is going to go first.
Cool. We're going to go straight in. I would suggest if you have headphones or earphones, now would be the time to put them in, just because you get closer to the work, I think. I hope. If not, it's fine. All speakers are speakers, sound is sound. So I'll just give 2 minutes for that. Okay, cool. And then I think, as I was trying to think of how the best kind of viewing, listening conditions. And I feel maybe just closing your eyes. I mean, do whatever's comfortable for you. These are just recommendations. So just closing your eyes and allowing your ears to be sensitive to what's being said. And yeah, okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm really bad with words. I'm a mess. My brain thinks really in really weird ways. So stay with me, guys. Hopefully life will be fine. Okay, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna share my screen. We're gonna go to this one, optimize, share sound, and we are sharing. Okay, if this wants to work. Okay. And we're starting in 5, 4, 3.
In the liberated future, I imagine, like I would say in Creole, liberdade dentro da minha cabeça, mas mais importante, liberdade na existência. And that literally means like freedom inside of my head, but more importantly, like freedom in my existence. Because when I think about a place where I could just exist as I am, and that's just completely fine, it's even so crazy to think. It's weird to think, because since I know it, like the world, like the society is so hateful and oppressive and divisive. So to think that one day I could just wake up and, for example, being allowed to do so many things that I'm not allowed to do because it's just seen as problematic. Or, for example, imagine if I could just wake up and just wear my natural hair whenever and wherever I wanted, and it wouldn't be seen as messy or unkept or unprofessional. Like, imagine I decide, you know what, I kind of want to do politics as well, and then I'm able to go as a politician and wear my 4C hair in television, and that's professional. Like, ain't nobody saying that is not professional. It is professional. Like, it is seen as just hair. It's just hair. Like, literally, that's what I want. I want to wake up in a world where my hair is just hair, because that's all it is. Like, imagine living in a world where I can just listen to whatever I want, and it's not seen as too black or not black enough, you know? Imagine I wake up and I can go to an interview or an audition, and I'm able to just get there, do my thing, and being judged like for my talent and skill and not how I look. Imagine being able to live in a world where I can express myself in whatever way I need to express myself, and I don't have to be worrying about how my tone is sounding, because I don't want people to see me as the angry black woman. Like, imagine a place where I don't have to argue with, my fellow Black sisters and brothers over, literally like different shades of Black. I don't have to argue about colorism, featurism, or texturism. Like, I don't have to argue over none of that. Like, imagine if I could just be a Black woman in peace. Wake up and be me, being this human being that I am, that happens to be, Black and a woman, and that's it. There's no oppression. That's just weird. It's even weird to think about it, but yeah. In a liberated future, I imagine being a Black woman in peace.
And in a liberated future, I imagine me being a footballer, helping my family, and in the future there being technology that could help society become a better place.
In a liberated future, I imagine the freedom to express myself without persecution. I imagine access to basic freedoms, and I imagine living in a democratic state where my rights are respected and valued.
In a liberated future, I imagine speaking without censure, being able to criticize our leaders without being called a traitor or someone who does not love their country, being able to afford the most basic of things without feeling a pinch, being able to dream of a future in politics, being able to dream of becoming like Kamala Harris, a Madam Vice President in America, right here in Zimbabwe. That is what I imagine.
In a liberated future, I imagine a hassle-free life. I imagine people earning a decent living. I imagine people having savings for generations to come. I imagine people investing in the future. I imagine people living a life where one could help a person to the next person for a greater future for us all.
Okay, in a liberated future, I imagine that there will be more opportunities for everyone. I imagine that there will be more hope for everyone of any race, color, or background. I imagine that people won't make judgments the way they do now. I imagine that we will be more accepting of each other, of who we are, of what we believe, and what our goals are for the future. I imagine that the economy will be better than it is now. I imagine that all countries will develop better. There will be more options for people and more career options.
In a liberated future, I imagine equality. I imagine equality between people of all genders, sex, different skin colors, social classes. I imagine equality in the workplace, in the community, and especially in the household. The acknowledgement that everyone is equal in different ways. Everyone is different and they contribute to society differently. But whatever they contribute, it is important.
In a liberated future, I imagine a space where everybody is able to define their own course in life. They do not lack in anything. Whatever it is that they think, they imagine, they can attain it. I think that is a freedom and liberation to its fullest.
In a liberated future, I imagine myself living freely without the need to dumb myself down in order to fit a certain stereotype just to make other people comfortable.
In a liberated future, I imagine being able to be and exist as a Black woman without the limitations, not only as a Black woman actually, as a Black woman and an immigrant Black woman, without the limitations of the daily life on simple little things like the way I speak, the way I control myself, the way I dress when I'm around certain people. example, family, or when I'm around certain people that I know that have certain type of mentalities, you know, without having to police myself at all times because I might be perceived or interpreted in a different, complete way. So yeah, I might have been a bit selfish on this one, because the first thing I thought about Liberated Future was my experience in it. Yeah, man.
In a liberated future, I imagine a black female prime minister who is there to represent black people and also more black representatives within parliament.
In a liberated future, I believe that I'll be helping a lot of people, playing whatever I would like to do, playing music, playing football, whatever, helping a lot of people. I could help people in life, make sure poverty is not a big issue, and help everyone, make sure everyone's happy and sorted.
In a liberated future, I imagine people having the tools they need to resist enforced opinions brought forth by the brainwashing and manipulation of consumerist cultures, and a world where the invisible structures of racial capitalism is understood and exposed, which will give power back to my people.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing. I like the idea from this morning to just, maybe we can sit in it for about 30 seconds before I pass to you, Emma. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm still sitting in that. I wonder if we could just take maybe some breaths together. I think I need to kind of re-arrive out of that amazing place, that spacescape. Yeah, is that okay? So maybe we can just like ground our feet, ground our thighs, ground our buttocks, spread really wide and massive and taking up as much space as you possibly can. Feeling the edges of you meet the edges of everything and realizing there are no edges. Letting all the air out of your body, feeling yourself deflate, release, surrender. And when you're really empty, taking a big inhale together. Keep going until you're as full as you can be and hold it and feel how substantial and exquisite you are. And then exhale and let it go. Thank you. In a liberated future, I imagine. In a liberated future, I'm free. What will freedom mean? How will I measure it? How will I be able to distinguish freedom from capitalism? I mean, captivity. How will I feel freedom? How will my body function when my muscles are not honed and developed through conditioning tactics of violence, hostility, and fear? How will I know pleasure, ecstasy, moisture? Will it feel like breath, like the sun on my flesh? To have my mind be only mine, free of oppressive patriarchal conditioning and doubts. To have access to the knowledge of my ancestors, in which me, my body, my existence was just right, just as it was supposed to be. I spent a lot of time imagining freedom over the past 12 months, thinking about liberation, about freedom, about the freedom to imagine. And I've written a lot of speculative work. I'd like to share some fragments of these stories, essays, and imaginings with you now. 1. Alaya could feel the Peaceway Fountain's mist clinging to eyelashes and stray wisps of hair that had escaped her bright blue headscarf. Blue for luck, blue like water. Water is life, her grandmother used to say. One of the only times she spoke in English, despite being fluent. She refused to speak the colonial language. The rainwater fountains had been installed to counteract the dry humidity of New London's central pedestrian walkways, and to accommodate the needs of its latest inhabitants. Over 2 million seedlings that tumbled abundantly from every lamppost, down the sides of every building, rimming the rooftops like raised eyebrows or low-hanging clouds tinged with green, brown, and white. The porous skin of the city, what was us and what was not, remained an unresolved conversation, Alaya knew. But her mother insisted that by distributing labor and rehabilitating hundreds of abandoned and unloved neighborhoods with the new all eat, all sleep, all thrive initiatives, they could take anyone in who wanted to come for a good while yet. She, for one, was happy with the influx of new faces. The more divergent and different, the more opportunities for harmony, for discordance, for symphonies. And if nothing else, more hands on deck meant less acts of service for everyone else, and no one could complain about reduced sanitation hours. 2. Hum 4-bed West sun-facing Many was busy preparing dinner. They had grown dark green Scotch bonnets, Banga's favourite, on their back porch for 3 summers now. But this was the first year the harvest had come to see them in full abundance. I see you, Scotches, they sang out happily as their electromagnetic appendages, invisible to the human eye, gently clipped free 4 ripe, grinning teeth green bulbs of joy, chests puffed out proudly. An unoccupied branch of energy spritzed the Scotches with plant food tincture, an offer of reciprocity. Yes, you are looking good this year. Thank you for coming. Mame, can I ask you something? Hum inquired, still unsure whether or not this was an appropriate moment. Of course. It was not often Hum began an interaction this way, and they were always gratified to be offered the attentiveness of their family. I've been reviewing my orientation manual again. Mame scowled a little. That pile of nonsense. I thought we were past all that. Enka, an artist by apprenticeship, but also a self-taught engineer and self-proclaimed tinkerer genius, had gone as far as to construct an expressive facial pad for Hum, a mishmash of wire and spare parts that had been sent with Hum's construction pack. She had woven hundreds of thin filaments into a kind of malleable face with a depression above the kitchen countertop, and programmed Hum to manipulate these wires into a variety of facial expressions. At Mame's distaste, Hum's wireframe face smiled knowingly. Before leaving for university, the first in her family to do so, Mame had dedicated much of her adolescence to eradicating what she called the white savior complex from Hum's core ontological programming. This was embedded within the orientation manual, courtesy of the off-continent manufacturers who had sent the first ever frequently glitching batch of stilted, aquatically convertible living homes to the increasingly flooded Akan Basin. The 62 family compounds that made up their community had mostly declined the offer and still associated them with a poverty aesthetic, despite there being 3 times the size of any traditional local dwelling. Memory mattered here, more than materialism. Living homes were codependent by nature. They were built to learn and grow with and from their assigned families. They could shut themselves down, do basic maintenance when a family went away, but only for short periods of time. Without the care and needs of their human companions, they soon fell into what the report Hum had found termed disrepair, but what they suspected was something much more like madness. 3. We may be the last people who remember, who want to remember, who are willing to bear the agony of the remembering in our bodies. We may be the last of the people who can breathe underwater, who can thrive in the deserts, whose blood runs hot in the tundra and cool in the equatorial forest. We may be the last people, a bouquet of oracles, truth-sayers, and medicine women, vessels of our nations, the memory keepers. We may be the last people this world will permit to survive, should we prove ourselves worthy, should we prove that we can change, that we can remember other ways. We commune in highlands on mountaintops, from the roofs of swallowed skyscrapers and the arid concave mouths of canyons our ancestors remember as rivers. We commune with all that is and with each other. We coordinate. We have taken the best of technology and the crafts. We live now in abundance. In the mornings we walk. In the mornings we work. We make. We transform. We cultivate. We harvest. We walk and sing and marvel at the great beauty of our altar life kin. In the afternoons we rest and meditate and make love to heal the wounds of our inherited souls. In the evenings we commune and feast and we rest some more. We live almost without waste, and that which we make we transform into art or offerings. We remember. We may be the last outpost, and there may not be another. Our books and our bones might be all that's left, and eventually only our dust. And that will be just fine. 4. Author's note. This was hard to write. As I wake up morning after morning to more stories of Black death, Black murder, new stories of pipelines and more oil spills, of unending droughts whilst governments continue to waterboard the earth, stories of the failed crops we all knew would come but could never prepare for, of Black and brown bodies piled on roadsides across the global south and nailed into nameless pine boxes on Heart Islands at the hands of this so-called pandemic, which is really a complete systemic failure, a government-funded fuck you to its people, certain peoples, my people. It's hard to write about other futures and other ways of being, of utopic possibilities in which art transforms white supremacist, patriarchal, extractive, global, neo-colonialist capitalism into interspecies codependency. This was hard to write. I am all out of stories. That is not because I no longer believe in these futures, in their desperately pumping hearts, but it is perhaps because, like anyone who's messed around with time travel and multiple temporal lines of reality knows, the more you fuck up in the past, the slimmer and slimmer the probabilities of those futures where the currency is hope, abundance, and possibility, as opposed to depression, scarcity, and inevitable failure become. Climate activists like to say, we're running out of time. I don't think there was ever a time when climate colonialism was going to amount to anything other than destruction and death. I think time stopped being on our side the moment our species made a choice that many of us, to differing degrees, with differing levels of consent, continue to make every day. And I don't know that art can change that anymore. I'm not saying it can't. I'm saying the percentile probabilities of those futures are decreasing at a rate that even time cannot stall. These texts then, pulled out of me like blood transfusions, may be more of a reckoning, of the presentation of a reality that imagines other possible ways of being. If we know that transformative climate justice requires, at its heart, undeniably and irrevocably the immediate and all-encompassing relinquishment of power, resources, and capital of commercial energy companies and their subsidiaries, which include large European arts institutions, then I think that maybe art's role in this socio-political context may be to prepare us for that divestment, to prepare, encourage, support, guilt trip, pressure, pleasure, and guide us towards letting go. The role of art may also most definitely be to imagine new futures, but those futures will most likely not include humanity as we know it, as some of us know it, as some of us remember it, if those futures want to survive. In a liberated future, I am free, even if I'm not there to see it. Thank you. We can maybe, are we taking another 30 seconds? I'm taking another 30 seconds. Okay. So I have a question for you, Tita.
Go on, go on.
Is that okay? I was thinking about, first of all, the piece that you shared is so amazing. And I want to just be grateful for its existence and for all the voices in that piece, but also for you kind of being the kind of, you know, ecological curator of bringing them into one new living organism. Mm-hmm. It's such a gift. But I was thinking about the first quote when the person who's speaking says, freedom inside of my head, but more importantly, freedom in my existence. And I've been thinking a lot about this idea of freedom inside of my head. And that's kind of what I meant when I was talking about freedom from like conditioning, like what would it be to not have to second guess everything I think, mm-hmm. to decipher whether or not it's like, is it me or is it the outside, or what's the outside and what's the inside and what's oppression and what's internalized? And so I wonder if like you could talk a little bit about in your making and facilitating practice, how you hold those kind of conflicting like drives to mm-hmm. kind of maintain and like recreate the status quo, which is what we're like taught to do, and like to like destroy it and create something that feels good, which is what we're taught not to do.
Mm-hmm. I think it's hard, as we all know. There's not a way to kind of eradicate those thoughts. I think it's important to be aware that they're there. It's important to continue asking yourself questions in different spaces. It's important to have your group, have your people, so that you can kind of present these ideas and have this awareness. You know, there's some things that I thought, you know, are only me who think it. And then you come together and you see the similarities and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I see what this is now. So it's not me. It's not my own issues with the world. This is something that is systemic or systematic. So I think that, number one, that awareness and having people to go back and forth with. And again, I don't, you know, navigating it within my practice, I think from the outset, I'm very much anti-hierarchical you know, I understand the importance of hierarchy and structure, but I also like to challenge it, and I make sure that my rooms kind of practice these things, and in the way I make work, and in you know, I spend a lot of times going to different communities. Like, for example, the process of making this, I said, okay, you know, I kind of sat and said, what does this mean to me? And I remember the last time I tried to think about it, and the answer, you know, just I couldn't think of a clear response. And so I said, okay, what if I see the spaces I exist in, and then ask the people in these spaces and see what I can bring together. So, you know, I started off with within my house and my family, and then I went out to other people, my students, people I've been teaching during lockdown, blah blah blah, and then further out towards kind of my home, which I, you know, I was born in Zimbabwe, but I came here when I was 4. So the connection, you know, it's like, what is home? Is it really, where do you fit that whole kind of argument? So understanding that, so constantly going against structure, I think. I don't know if this is answering the question. I go on some weird tangents. Constantly challenging the structures. And yeah, I think my practice is ultimately about dismantling anything like that. Again, being anti-disciplinary, not defining myself. Because when you start, I mean, again, you know, there are good and bad. There is good to leadership. There is good to definitions and understanding. But sometimes you get too stuck within it, and then that causes all types of issues. I don't know if that makes sense. Did that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it totally makes sense. I think it's like, it is absolutely a balance of like, also I think you can overthink,
yeah,
and then you don't do anything, you don't get on with it.
Yeah, just being brave and constantly asking, you know, because I think what most of some of the voices on the recordings, and I have other people as well that I didn't add to it because of time, but the youngest ones, the children, you know, they have this element of play and the freedoms. They you know, young enough not to see the evils and harshness of the world. So I always ask myself, like, what would young Tita say? What would she say? What would she do at this moment? Like, what would she respond? How would she interact with whatever it is? So sometimes being in the room, knowing something's happening, but just removing that thought and allowing yourself to play and be young is helpful, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. I think Hannah Black, who's an art critic, wrote this really interesting piece in Art Forum years ago, called The Identity Artist and the Identity Critic. And then she did a talk afterwards while I was at Goldsmiths, and she came and she said, I'm always writing for the white man in my head. And I think I didn't understand it really when she said it, but it stayed with me. But now that I am writing a lot and my work is in various white-run journals, I'm so aware of it. I'm so aware of this white man in my head, and yeah, like when am I writing for me? When am I writing for my community? How do I make sure that work is not kind of picked up and tokenized? And
yeah, and there's a balance. I think balance and the awareness. As long as you have it, and as long as you know, and you know there are moments where you're kind of stepping into a territory that needs to be questioned. So keeping that constant. And I'm like super interested in the way writers work. I don't know, like, I mean, crazy what you wrote, put together, was actually, it was a lot of information to process, one, and then a lot of ideas as well that I'm like, okay, I didn't consider this. And then a lot of similarities and patterns, talking about renewal and, you know, this whole idea of the climate crisis that's happening right now. And I just wanted to know how, I guess, what was your initial response to the provocation, and then how did it end up where it is, which
yeah, I mean, first of all, this is what my head looks like all the time, so I always have to try and translate from like my head to like how's this going to feel to receive? So full disclosure, that literally was fragments from three different stories and an author's note that accompanied a story. So it was like a kind of, it was fragmented. So it was supposed to feel like a wash of information. But I think when I got the provocation, I really rejected it in my body. And I think that's because, and the author's note that I read at the end is because, you know, a lot of people's response, white people's response to the whole recent Black Lives Matter protests and this kind of sudden, oh my God, COVID's affecting Black people. Oh my God, climate change is affecting Black people. Oh my God, racism affects Black people, has been like, let's find some great Black artists and get them to write about futures, because that's going to be really shiny. And then we're going to be like doing our BLM work and like reinforcing our BLM statement, but we're not really focusing on like complicity and violence and the shit we're actually doing wrong. And so I kind of got put in this really difficult, not difficult because it was a privileged position to be offered paid work to write, but an potentially complicit, I think, position where I'm kind of being asked to write these Black futures that are not necessarily shiny, but like it's kind of an escape route from dealing with like what's happening right now, I think. So it was also a kind of thing of like, you know, what does it mean to imagine a liberated future, and who am I imagining that with, and who am I imagining it for, and do I ever like, so the little bit that I read at the beginning, that's like was my direct response to the provocation, the tiny like few lines, but then I just really wanted to kind of complicate the question and complicate what it means to imagine a liberated future right now, and like the kind of the traps I think that I see and that I am in, I think, through being a speculative writer and then through being asked to write speculatively in this moment. And like it's like you said, you know, you have to just be aware of them and talk about them and call them out when you feel like institutions are using you to avoid them. But then also you have to write and you have to get on with it. And that I think was also why your piece felt like such a gift, because it was almost like a moment of me being like, yeah, but it's also okay to stop and imagine my liberated future and just take a minute. And there's something also I think about feeling in service. I feel like my writing, I think about it as an act of service. Like I think about who am I in service to, and who am I lifting up? Who am I, you know, like that's the kind of care part of, or a care part of my job. So it's also like difficult to focus on my own liberation, I think, because I try to think a lot about my community's liberation, or like all living organisms liberation, you know.
Yeah, and I feel I've like you mentioned being trapped, your own traps. I think because again, I was scared to answer the question, but I said, you know, it's hard to answer the question, and living in this time, it's like, oh, can I even imagine? Like, where do I even start to imagine? So from hearing, you know, again, getting these answers and hearing the amount of comments that came through and through the investigations and listening and reading and whatnot, you see where other people are trapped. So you see other people's boxes, and then you realize how you can work within your box, if that makes sense.
Reclaim your box.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, this is happening there. Compared to me, not that, you know, you're comparing worries and issues and troubles and complaints, but it allows you to have the sense of awareness that this is where we're at, and you must continue whatever, you know, small steps, small actions. As I work with universities and I teach a lot of design students, you know, be activists, in whatever ways they can, make their rehearsal rooms. You're not just putting on a show. You need to give people experiences. I feel like as an artist, I want to give audiences tools to be able to communicate much clearer and better, even though my communication isn't that fantastic. But, you know, you're facilitating rooms and you're facilitating processes, so you're unable to kind of, as you said, like facilitate yourself. So yeah, I think having these boxes, seeing other people's boxes and where they're living in, and where they want to get to. And sometimes someone wants to get into your box and you're like, oh, my box isn't that much of a problem anymore. So yeah, it is kind of empowers me to continue making whatever small actions, small changes, the small fights.
And the small fights are often more sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think also what I just keep talking about, I do quite a lot of like mentoring of Black artists and artists of color who are like coming out of school now and entering this really intense like world field. And I just keep saying, you know, like, you need to be here in 50 years. I cannot stress enough how many Black women artists are not here who should be here. I cannot say it enough. So like, what are the actions that you can do that are going to mean you're going to be here in 60 years and you're going to be here still able to imagine, still able to experience pleasure, you know, that you haven't like dried yourself out or drained yourself out or been so drained by the system that like you're not able to be here, because this is, I mean, this is so real. I feel like I say this, you know, to people who like go to the Tate and that's what they think art is. And I'm like, you don't even understand how much this is a life and death kind of situation. You don't even understand. I'm not like being metaphorical, I'm being literal, you know? So like, what do you need to do to like be here and be nurtured and be loved? And there was a great tweet that came out last year that was like, as a woman of color academic, it is no longer acceptable to promote burnout as best practice. And I was just like, yes, you know, like I have a responsibility to up and coming academics and artists and writers to be like, it's not okay for you to be burnt out and exhausted. Like, that's not what it looks, that's not what it has to look like.
100%. I think we should, just because I'm aware of time as well.
I know, I was like,
what? I need to jump in, but also a word, but also like, I'm so conscious of everyone's time. I'm so honored and I'm so moved by what you've both shared. And you know, there's so much love in the chat. Just you know, do take some time to have a look if you can. Joe says the term ecological curator, love this. And really resonate with that feeling. A quick question about any recommendations about climate colonialism. Amma, your words are just really powerful. Lots of love in the messages and on Twitter and on socials. But just if you've got any recommended reading further.
I need to like put my mind to it, because there's a lot of things that I would recommend that don't explicitly talk about climate colonialism. So what I will do is take that as an invitation to write like a reading list, and I will put it on Twitter. Amazing. Sometime this weekend, like, I mean, like a short one, of where to go to start thinking about climate colonialism.
And
so follow me on Twitter and I'll tweet it.
Amazing. So your Twitter is amjamb, is that right?
Yes.
That's the most incredible, like, yeah, I remember it. And,
I know, I'm so impressed. So my mum calls me, you know, Amjam.
It's really funny. This is a total side note, but I'm a twin and my twin brother's called Jamal, so we are Amjam. And anyway, so I think that's why I remember it, Amjam. And Tida, it's only Tida.
Yeah.
Also very memorable.
Big mistake, because I'm like, it's only Tida, and they're like, only Tida? No, it's only Tida.
But if if you're following us on socials, everything, like, all the details and everything will be there. I want to extend the most gratitude to you both for your time, for your sharing, for your words, for your sounds, for your heart, for your energy and everything. I want to extend the most gratitude to all of those who have joined us this afternoon, and those who have stuck with us from the morning. Honestly, I'm just like, I think I need more than 30 seconds. So I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna invite anyone. We have one more session for today, which is the keynote with Lajanae McMillan, who is an incredible artist based at the East Coast of the US, doing incredible work around Black movement, technology, dance choreography, and reclaiming digital technology for Black creators. So I'd really love to see as many of you there as possible. But Tida, Amma,
thank you so much. Tida, thank you so much. It's such an honor to share space with you.
Thank you so much, Amma. Absolutely beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. See you soon.